Welcome to episode 3 of Tapestry Reassembled. I'm Edie Song. We're talking about the ideas that a centrist third candidate for president in 2024 can bring to the American people to really address and solve those long-standing issues the country faces.
And I'm Kate Ross. This episode will focus on health care, comprehensive immigration reform, criminal victims' justice and the environment, four of the most important issues seen when voters are polled about what matters most to them when deciding who to vote for. We'll start with health care.
Along with employer-provided health care coverage for more than 250 million Americans, it's great that there's Medicaid and Medicare to provide health care coverage for the poor and elderly. But both systems are inefficient and due to price control pressures are not the best at providing high-quality care. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, continues to extend health care coverage to millions of uninsured individuals around the country.
From 2013 to 2023, about 20 million people gained health care coverage, about half of whom were newly covered by Obamacare plans, and half got covered by employer plans. Another 30 million transferred to Obamacare plans from other coverage. But as of 2023, more than 25 million people remain without coverage.
The patchwork of coverage isn't doing the American public a favor. We spend more per person on our healthcare system than just about every other country, yet we have tens of millions of people receiving substandard care or not covered at all. We need to overhaul the system, in a way that works for everyone, but without adopting a lower quality service level for everyone as we replace a system with acceptable or high quality care for most.
A logical answer that preserves the motivation of private enterprise efficiency is to transition from the current healthcare system in the U.S. to a new modified single-payer approach. Our very effective private healthcare system should replace the inefficient government bureaucracy that delivers healthcare to 119 million Americans.
A sensible approach is to adapt a system out of the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program, or FEHBP. That's the same healthcare coverage provided to Congress, and has multiple companies delivering insurance that's available in every state. Healthcare coverage minimum content will be determined by the typical current FEHBP plan. It will be amended annually to a standard set by a commission to be established by Congress and with equal representation by Congress and the insurers. The standard will include significant expansion of mental health services to address the crisis of suicides, depression/anxiety, and other mental health challenges facing Americans.
The first group of people to join the renamed U.S. Health Program, or USHP, in the first year of the transition will be public employees of all 50 states and their local jurisdictions, cities and counties. Every family will pick their preferred health care insurer. Each state/local government will pay the employer's share of annual premiums the same as is currently done by the federal government for its employees.
The second group of people to get this coverage in the second year will be all the people enrolled in Medicare, Medicaid, and military TRICARE and VA care. For anyone who can't afford their coverage, their contribution will be capped at 7.5% of their gross annual income, with the balance of their share of the costs paid by the federal government. In the case of Medicare and Medicaid, the employer share is paid by the state government where they reside. For TRICARE and the VA, of course, the employer share is paid by the federal government.
The third group of people who will get this coverage in the third year will be all of the people who are either unemployed or whose employers have fewer than 50 employees. If the enrollee isn't employed, the state where they reside pays the enrollee's share and the federal government pays the employer's share. For the small companies, the employer will pay their share only if enrollees are employed full-time. If they are employed less than full-time, the employer and the federal government will split the employer's share proportionally, with the employer's share equal to whatever % their part-time work equals.
As above, there will be a cap on the employee's costs for health care coverage, 7.5% of gross annual income, with the balance paid by the state where the enrollee has their primary residence.
In the last enrollment year, all remaining households will be enrolled in U.S. Health Benefits Program insurance coverage plans, replacing the administrative burden on companies with more than 50 employees to set up and manage healthcare coverage. The same 7.5% cap on the employee's share as with small companies will apply.
Conversion to this modified single-payer approach will concentrate the administrative burden of offering and documenting enrollment into the U.S. Health Program Agency of the Department of Health and Human Services, freeing the private sector as well as local and state governments from the need to manage healthcare coverage for their employees. Their responsibility would consist only of arranging payment of the employer's share, or their share of the employee's premium in special circumstances, to the health insurance provider the employee had selected in the annual open season.
As mentioned above, this healthcare plan integrates the Veterans Administration healthcare services and other publicly run healthcare services to reduce inefficiency and improve patient outcomes. VA hospitals will be sold off to the private sector to add healthcare infrastructure to serve all Americans.
Not included in the above discussion are the illegal aliens who have flooded into the country in recent years, to include the unprecedented influx over the past 3 years. They will be able to obtain coverage once comprehensive immigration reform gets put in place, which is the next topic that a disruptive third candidate would tackle, using an approach that neither of the two main parties' candidates has proposed.
Deferred action for childhood arrival or DACA participants get to proceed on a pathway to citizenship only after payment of a penalty of 10 times the cost of immigration paid by those who immigrated legally, or about $150,000 per person.
There are 2 consequences that apply as a result of the violation of law during the original illegal entry. First, none of the DACA participants are eligible to vote in federal, state, or local elections for the remainder of their lives. Second, neither they nor their parents are eligible to use the chain migration process to bring other family members to the U.S. Those other family members are eligible to apply for legal immigration on their own merits, and the children of DACA participants who are born in the U.S. are eligible to vote.
It seems harsh, but actions have consequences. The payment amount seems harsh as well, but there's a caveat to that as well. That payment doesn't have to be made by the DACA participant, it can be made by anyone, such as nonprofit illegal immigrant support groups or corporate or private donors. Once the payment is made, the citizenship process can be completed.
For illegal aliens other than DACA participants, they are eligible for a pathway to citizenship only after payment of a penalty of 20 times the cost of immigration paid by those who immigrated legally, or about $300,000 per person. Once again, they are not eligible to vote, nor are they eligible for the use of the chain migration process, and the payment can be made by anyone.
For companies that employed the illegal aliens, they will pay a penalty equal to 3 times the annual salary of a legal U.S. citizen who would have worked in those jobs filled by illegal aliens for every year that they had an illegal alien on their payroll. Any future hiring of illegal aliens will be treated as a white-collar crime subject to the mandatory minimum sentencing described as we explore criminal victim justice reform next.
Criminal victims' justice is built off the natural right of all U.S. persons to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A president who defends that right should stand by the viewpoint that any wrongful death carries with it the consequence of the equivalent penalty. A policy consistent with that will establish a Department of Justice review of all state and federal cases with arrests for murder, manslaughter, vehicular homicide, or other wrongful death.
The review will determine whether or not the state case resulted in prosecution or acquittal, if there is evidence beyond a reasonable doubt of guilt. In that case, and in all cases where the defendant pleads guilty or was found guilty, the death penalty will be carried out immediately.
The reason for this is that the current state of sentences for capital crimes is monstrously offensive to the deceased and their families, the victims who are seeking justice. Even those who are convicted often get less than 10 years in prison for depriving the victim and their family of decades of life together. It's blatantly abusive to the victims of these crimes.
Also abusive are the light sentences in the cases of rape, sexual assault, and child sexual molestation. To bring about justice for the victims of all such crimes, a federal judicial review will occur for every perpetrator, regardless of the state-level sentence. If there is absolutely incontrovertible evidence of guilt, or if the preponderance of evidence shows guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the sentence will be death. That's because the impact on the victim is a lifetime of pain.
Too many victims of violent sex crimes see the perpetrator walk free or get a minimal sentence in prison, while the rest of their lives are destroyed by the psychological post-trauma stress. Those victims deserve justice by society over the barbarians who mistreated them so badly.
Another category of victims' justice where the perpetrator all too often walks away with too light of a sentence is in white-collar financial crimes. The candidate should propose a new approach that assigns prison sentences based upon the scale of the crime. The sentence will be calculated by dividing the amount of money stolen or embezzled by the prior calendar year's median U.S. household income.
For example, in 2024, the U.S. median household income was about $75,000 per year. So a swindler who scams multiple people for $300,000 will serve 4 years without parole, whether it be for identity theft, securities fraud, embezzlement, tax fraud, Ponzi schemes, or other financial crimes.
And the phrase without parole needs to be clarified. Parole is a concept that can apply when there's a range of appropriate sentences for a particular crime. However, the concept of victims' rights demands that minimum sentences be consistent and higher than have traditionally applied.
Under this sensible centrist candidate's victims' justice reform, crimes other than capital crimes should have sentences that are consistent and never shortened. While it can feel harsh to subject another human being to long confinements, the shorter the sentence for the perpetrator of the crime, the greater the societal offense to the victim.
Penalties that are too small have led to increased criminal behavior. Despite negative media attention on the U.S. incarceration rate being so much higher than other industrialized nations, that shouldn't lead to policies that tolerate or excuse criminal behavior. It is much better for 20 truly repentant perpetrators to serve their sentences fully, than for one hardened criminal to be let out early, only to harm another victim.
The last element of a wise centrist candidate's solutions to the plight of victims is to continue the efforts already ongoing to reduce racial inequality in sentencing. There is entirely too much evidence of two standards of sentencing, so there should be a judicial review of individual cases thoroughly for all currently incarcerated individuals as well as all new convictions.
This review will assure that any disparities in sentencing are strictly due to the extenuating circumstances of prior criminal history or other factors that can logically justify a harsher sentence than someone else convicted of the same crime who is not from a historically marginalized racial or ethnic group. That will go a long way towards satisfying those communities' long-standing grievances about a system that doesn't treat all citizens equally.
The other long-standing issue in the U.S. that needs to be addressed is the climate crisis. One key idea that a third candidate could put forward combines social equity, economic opportunity in traditionally marginalized areas, and environmentally friendly renewable energy.
Big energy companies would build solar panel production facilities and build metal fabrication facilities to make structures in which to install those panels, for massive solar farms that would be installed across the country, providing a big boost to the percentage of U.S. energy derived from solar power. The federal government would arrange a low-cost or no-cost contract with those energy companies, in exchange for producing the solar panels and associated equipment exclusively in opportunity zones.
Additionally, the plan would require that at least 60% of the workers must come from within those communities, at least 20% of the workers must be chronically unemployed individuals, and at least 25% of the workers must be individuals who used to be incarcerated.
The government would allow the solar farms to be built on land already part of the federal highway system, using the vertical space over and adjacent to the thousands of miles of interstate highways that cross the Great Plains states and other southern and western states. It would also allow all government-owned parking lots to be covered with solar farms.
That idea will generate great economic progress for traditionally economically depressed communities, produce tens of gigawatts of electricity for many years to come, and address the challenge that formerly incarcerated individuals face at overcoming their past and rejoining civilized society.
A second idea to pursue vigorously to address the climate crisis is to assess which native plant species provide the greatest carbon sink benefit and to stimulate reforestation and regreening of the countryside to build off of the Trillion Trees initiative. Further, tax breaks that emphasize brownfield investments and tax penalties associated with greenfield investments will also encourage greater carbon sink preservation. Included in the brownfield tax incentives will be solar panel installation that taps into the production established in the idea described above.
A third climate crisis idea will be to stabilize excessive drought and excessive rain regions by creating a large-scale water pipeline project to pump excess rainwater from those areas that traditionally get flooded to those areas that traditionally suffer severe droughts. For example, the Red River floods just about every year in the late winter, so water treatment facilities and pipelines will be built to siphon off the water before it reaches flood stage, and move the water to the desert southwest in the Colorado River Basin. As with the solar power idea, the intent of the public works project related to water movement will bias toward job seekers who are formerly incarcerated, and long-term unemployed people.
Not only would that help out the communities that suffer from drought, it would benefit downriver communities who experience devastating floods, destroying their homes. It would greatly benefit insurance companies who would otherwise pay out massively to replace those homes, and would benefit homeowners because it would lower their cost of insurance.
Another thing that could be done, to both reduce the debt and protect the environment, is to penalize companies that are caught polluting according to the criminal victim justice reform proposals included elsewhere in this platform. Top management individuals in those companies who were proved in court to be either malicious or willfully negligent in allowing pollution to occur should be treated as white-collar criminals. The cleanup costs for their pollution disasters would be used to determine the prison sentence to be imposed.
That wraps it up for this episode's topics. We'll resume next time with Social Security reform. For Edie Song, I'm Kate Ross with the Tapestry Reassembled podcast.